I am joined today by my colleagues, Jim Kintowski, who is a partner here at Baypoint and our chief investment officer, and Jake Sadler, who is also a partner here and one of our lead advisors. Jim is based out of Annapolis, and Jake is based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And it's a pleasure to be here with you both. How are we doing today? Feeling good?
Doing great.
All good down here.
Yeah?
You sound like you've done this before. You sound like you've hosted a show.
We did one last week.
Oh, right. Which is in the trash, probably, most likely.
Yeah.
Right. It's in the can. It's ready to be released. We're just polishing it up. But today I'm really excited because Jake is on the hot seat today. Spotlight's on him because we are going to be diving into an article that he recently wrote and posted to the Baypoint blog entitled, and I want to make sure I have the exact name here, 4 Alternatives to 401k for Small Businesses. I'm really excited to just sort of talk about the meat of the article, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that there were some startling facts at the top of the article that really jumped out at me. The first one of which was that I believe it was 5.1 million applications for new businesses were filed in the United States in 2021. I don't know what the previous historical numbers are, but that sounds like a record.
Yeah, I don't know the previous historical numbers either.
Yeah?
Yep, record highs in 2021. Yep. It was 4.4 million in 2020.
4.4. Yeah. Okay.
We're a nation of businesses.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would make sense, right? You know, there's the people leaving their jobs, rethinking what they want to do for work. What is presumably a great outpouring of creativity due to everyone being stuck at home for 1 year plus.
What's interesting too on that article, which actually came from NPR, about a third of those applications, so about a third of that close to 5.5 million applications, were businesses that were deemed likely to hire employees. So it wasn't, the overwhelming majority. The majority, were sole proprietors and so forth, sole business owners, but a good portion of those were businesses likely to hire employees.
Yeah, that is fascinating because I think, at least like sort of what my initial like thinking would be, all right, so 5.4 million businesses, 5.4 billion businesses are, being filed to open. Like these are, people like who have a hobby or a side hustle and sitting at home and during COVID, and now it's like, all right, well, let's make this real. And that seems like a sole proprietorship thing. So it's really very interesting that percentage of it is, are firms that, think they could scale to employees.
Sorry, Jake, real quick, out of curiosity, I was going to say, in that article, did it have a failure rate of small businesses?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to dig that up to see. There has to be that information has to be out there somewhere. So we're being optimists here and just looking at the new businesses that are starting. And one of the questions that a lot of these new businesses may have is how do I put my new business to work and help save and prepare for retirement? And that looks a little bit different for maybe some businesses that are deemed likely to hire employees versus businesses that are purely just solo operations.
Yeah, definitely. And that sort of, was going to be my first question, or leads nicely to the first question, because the article is titled 4 Alternatives to the 401k for a Small Business. And I kind of like to just sort of interrogate that premise for a second, because, people hear 401k. I mean, it's sort of like the Kleenex of retirement plans, right? It's like the name brand that has become, synonymous for, the whole category. But why might, given how popular the 401k is, why might a small business owner even need an alternative or want an alternative?
Well, that's really interesting that you point that out, Zach, that, 401k kind of becomes a catch-all term for any and all forms of retirement plans. And so we're not really necessarily kind of speaking to that. But, in terms of, the 401k and alternatives, this is the question that's being asked by my small business owners is what are the alternatives to, the 401k? And it's interesting that this is the question that's coming up, instead of maybe is a 401k right for my small business? While the article that we put together focuses on alternatives, we really need to kind of flip the question on its head, and say, consider the 401k first, because there's a lot of preconceived notions around what a 401k is, and this is something for only large businesses, and this has to be incredibly complicated and incredibly expensive. This is not. It's just a default assumption. This is not appropriate for small businesses. So I think that's why we see, the question out there. What are the alternatives to the 401k, rather than the question out there being, is a 401k right for my small business?
Yeah, that's really interesting. The idea that it's it's sort of an assumption that this might not be appropriate for me or my needs right now.
Right.
That they're coming to you already with that knowledge, or at least that assumption.
Yeah, it's kind of baked in. It's I've got a small business. I'm not ready for the 401k. But what are the alternatives? And I think that should kind of be flipped on its head and say, I've got a small business, and I have this objective. I want to use this to save for retirement. What's the best way to do that? Is a 401k the right choice?
In
And
addition,
I'm curious,
I would add that, out there in the marketing world and online, there are a lot of options for small businesses. So that leads to, I think, people asking the questions, or maybe assuming a lot of times that the 401k is not the right answer, just with the wealth of information that's online.
and that's something I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, Jim, just sort of like in your own financial advisory practice and in your experience when you have clients coming to you, small business owner clients coming to you. Um, what do you think it is about like the 401k as a savings and investment vehicle that small business owners look at and they say, well, that's not for me yet. That's too much. That's too complex. Like, why is that feeling there?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, to what Jake said a little bit, it just seems like it's complex, and it seems like, there's a lot of things that go along with it. It's almost like a second job to run a 401k. There's a tax return that gets filed with it. There's a plan administrator that goes along with it. There's testing in theory that goes along with it. If it's a regular 401k and you don't have the right plan document set up. So I would say that there's this assumption that they are very complicated to run and manage. And so when you're thinking about a small business and you're thinking about all the things you have going on in your life already, to add that level of complexity to your life is not something you want to think about. So a lot of times people are thinking, hey, I need to put something in place for myself as a business owner to save, and I want to defer taxes. What's the easiest way to do it?
Yeah, I think, Jim, that's a really good point, because as for a lot of small business owners that we work with, they're wired in a certain way. You want to figure everything out, figure out how it works, and kind of know all the nuts and bolts of it. And then you're confronted with the 401k, and it is complicated. Kind of don't get me wrong. 401k plan. If you were going to try to do it all yourself and try to figure it out all yourself, that would be complicated, and that would take up way too much time to try to do that. But what's happened, in recent years, is that we've seen, kind of this consolidation, where there's a lot of turnkey type of solutions for getting a 401k plan up and running, and the costs have come down considerably over the years. So, we've seen a lot of advantages out there. So for business owners that see, this as something that they want to explore, but are also willing and interested in delegating to someone else who knows all the nuts and bolts and can just in a turnkey fashion get them set up, the 401k, certainly exists as an effective option there without having to learn everything.
Jake, I'm going to add to that. The 401k is complex in itself, but then the way they're offered can actually add some complexity also, because you can go to somebody that does the tax return, the plan administration, and the investments, or you could go to somebody for just the 5,500 or the tax return, just the investments and just the plan administration. So there's some complexity on actually who you hire to run a 401k, and there's different costs associated with all those different things. So not only do you got to try and figure out how to put a 401k in place and is it right for you, you got to figure out who you're going to hire, how much you're going to pay. And there's different ways that those providers charge for all those things. So it is a maze when you think about it.
Yeah, the landscape is very complicated. There's so many options to choose from and routes to go. And this is where, I think a lot of business owners would be well served by just kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, what is my objective behind getting a retirement plan up and running? And, is this primarily to incentivize employees, create employee benefit, or is this primarily a mechanism for me as the business owner or business owners to really sock away as much as we can towards retirement? And so, those are questions that don't necessarily come naturally to kind of ask. And so this is where having a sounding board, having someone to talk to is really advantageous to ask these questions. Say, what's the objective here? What do you want to achieve? And then from that, begin to explore the landscape of solutions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The idea of, what is it for and what is the object of the plan, and just, to simplify, right? Is it for, let's say I'm a business owner, is it for me, the business owner, or is it for the employees to attract and retain? And I just kind of like to tease that out a little bit. So Jake, if I were to come to you as a potential client and I said, hey, I'm a business owner and I want to sock away as much money as I can for my own retirement. With that as sort of the starting point, where might you point me?
Well, first we need to find out more about your business, and we need to find out more about, business's cash flow, number of employees, types of employees that you have, what does your revenue, income look like, and so forth. What does your tax picture look like? So we need to really get a feel for your situation first, and then kind of, look at the objective. Okay, sock away as much as we can. And if you're a solo, business owner, then we're going to gravitate towards, either a SEP IRA or likely a solo 401k. So a unique type of 401k plan that can be used by, sole proprietors and solo business owners. If you have a business with, a number of employees and, you're looking, to create an employee benefit, but again, the objective is to put away as much as you possibly can for yourself. Then we're going to probably gravitate towards the traditional 401k plan. And then, we kind of talked about complexity of the 401k plan. There are so many choices that you can build into your plan design if you're starting a 401k plan that can allow you to, kind of custom fit the 401k to multiple objectives. So if you just want to get something, if you have, business with some employees, fewer than 100, and you want just kind of a simple, I want the fastest possible plan to get up and running for my employees, then something like a simple IRA is going to stand out as a choice to just get it up and running. But that's not really going to allow the business owner to put away as much as possible for themselves.
Sure. And when we say, it's easier to get it up and running, is that because there's less testing involved, or, there's less complexity when it comes to tax filing requirements?
Yeah, I'll let Jim speak to the tax filing requirements for the simple. The administrative burden is a lot less with the simple. There's a handful of forms you need to complete, a couple of things you need to check the box on each year, and not as many choices or, not as much flexibility in terms of plan design, and really no requirement in terms of testing other than who are your employees and do they meet the minimum requirement for participation. So, that's kind of what we're looking at there. But, Jim, I don't know if on the tax side you see, some big differences there between the simple and the 401k.
Yeah. So the reason why people end up gravitating to these small business retirement plans is because you eliminate some of that headache and that administrative cost. And there are 5500s are not required for those types of plans that I'm aware of, unless you have an individual 401k. And in that case, if you get assets over a certain amount, I think it's $250,000, then you have to worry about filing a tax return for that. But the beauty of these small business retirement plans, the SEPs, the Simples, the individual 401k is the fact that you eliminate all that testing, all the the 5,500 paperwork and all that good stuff. So that leads to me to say, hey, if we can eliminate all that stuff, you eliminate cost and you simplify your life. So you definitely want to look to see if one of those fits in your situation.
And one thing I wanted to ask about based on the article was the fourth listed, rather the fourth type of retirement plan available to small business owners listed in the article is one that is likely more familiar to our listeners, which is the IRA and the Roth IRA. And I was wondering, Jake, if you could just talk a little bit about how that kind of account can fit in with any of the others, because there ends up being a little bit more flexibility there. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, that's right. And like, I think for small business owners, their identities aren't mutually exclusive. There's this balancing act that small business owners, have to navigate between the commitment of time and energy and resources towards the business and the business finances versus the commitment of time and resources towards their personal finances and their personal financial future. So there's this constant balancing act that business owners face, but it doesn't always have to be one or the other. So you can do both, and that's what we encourage a lot of our business owner clients to do, is to focus on both. Grow the business methodically. There are going to be points in time where you're going to need to really focus your resources into the business, but don't lose sight of the personal side. And so for a lot of business owners, you can pair a small business plan, what you're doing there, with personal retirement accounts. And what set of options, whether it's a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, or if you're making non-deductible traditional IRA contributions and converting them on an annual basis into Roths, whatever, option is best suited for them. It's on a case-by-case basis. But there are options for small business owners to blend those objectives, get the plan that's right for the business in place, and then also do something on the personal side.
I would add to that piece on the IRAs and the Roth IRAs, the really good place for them is if you don't want to deal with your employees or having to worry about contributing to your employees. I'm not saying that's the right way to go. I'm just saying, look, you just want to keep it really simple. The IRAs and the Roth IRAs are not tied to your business necessarily. They're tied to your personal income, which then comes from your business. So they're separate from your business. They can still be used to get a tax deduction or save on a tax-free basis, but they're not tied to your business. So keeping it really simple, you just go with something like that, and you're limited to the amount of money you can save, but it's just really a lot easier to do.
And the same thing goes for non-business owners as well, I'll point out.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jake. So people with the resources that have the ability to fund these accounts, you're looking at first the business and then the personal side to see if you can maximize these savings vehicles. And tying in the income limitations and all that stuff makes it hard sometimes, but you definitely want to take advantage of all opportunities if the situation permits itself.
Well, I've been keeping a semi-watchful eye over the recording clock, and it looks like we are just about out of time. So I just want to open the floor in case there was anything else that I didn't ask that either of you would have liked me to ask, or anything that seems like a glaring omission.
Yeah, so going back to what Jake said earlier about your figuring out what your situation is and your employees, knowing that information and getting in the hands of somebody that's knowledgeable about these 401k plans can really help you figure out which one of these to use. So the simple might apply in a certain situation where you have, a lot of employees and you don't want to put a lot of money into the plan yourself, and you just want to, let your employees do it themselves and open up their accounts and do their own investments. Whereas, an individual 401k is going to only apply if you have no employees. So, somebody comes to me and says, I have no employees. The first thing I think about is the individual 401k, and the SEP, the simple sort of leaves the equation. And the individual 401k, I would add, really makes sense if you're in a position where you want to sock away a lot of money, but you don't make a lot of money. So the case where somebody makes $75,000 as a spouse of somebody who makes a lot of money and you want to defer a good chunk of your income, you can put in your employee portion of the plan, which is 20,500 nowadays. Plus you can then put in, 25% of your compensation there. So knowing your situation, like Jake mentioned earlier, and knowing your employees and their salaries and their ages really goes a long way to figuring out what the right plan to put in place is. And you may even be able to start with one plan, monitor your situation for a year or two, and as some of these limitations go away, you can then change plans. And that's what we do in a lot of cases where people just start out their businesses and they have no employees. They start out with an individual 401k, they get employees, and then we might look for a SEP, which has a 3-year not a vesting period, but eligibility period. And so there's just lots of ways to think about it, and knowing your situation is really, really important. So that was a big rambling exit, Zach, but I think it's worthwhile touching on some of those things.
And I'll just the only thing I was going to add to that is, I mean, in addition to monitoring, I think it goes, kind of a few steps prior to that where, for business owners, if you're not in a position right now in the current moment to, get a retirement plan up and running, go ahead and put it on your radar and go ahead and think about, how in the future, as your business grows, as your income grows, you may want to incorporate, one of these types of plans in, because sometimes what we see is that, business gets to a certain point and then they're in almost kind of a panic, let's get this plan in place. And it's not necessarily as intentionally designed to meet their objectives as they would like it to be, because it's just kind of put out a fire in the moment. So, think about things in advance and be prepared in advance. What I would add to that.
Yeah, it's funny, Jake, that I see that a lot too. People have a good year. They don't expect a good year. And it's December 31st and they're saying, oh my gosh, I got this big tax bill. How do I get rid of this thing? And, putting a plan in place is one way to do that. The rules softened 2 years ago where they let you start setting up plans after the year end. But you just got to remember that employee contributions still technically need to be made, through a salary or 2 weeks after the year end. And so you got to be a little careful that you miss out on those contributions. But yeah, thinking ahead is a really good point. You don't want to be caught with a big tax bill and no plan in place to deal with that.
Yeah, if we could just, get all our, small business owners to, just ask that question. What if I have a really great year this year? How am I going to start to mitigate, taxes there and, work towards some of these objectives that I have? A lot of times what if business tanks this year?
What if you have to deal with
right? Yeah,
things are going well?
So it's a bit of a different question, but a good one to ask and plan for in advance.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm picturing like a flow chart when you talk about like knowing your situation, knowing your objectives. How many employees do I have? How much money am I making? If yes, if no, leading to the 4 alternatives.
Hey, you got it. I'm sure there's one out there somewhere to utilize.
Probably is. I'll have to take a look. Yeah, we'll have to throw it in the show notes.
Yeah, throw it in the show notes. You might have to redo your exit here, Zach. We extended this on a little bit longer than we probably recorded another 5 minutes after you tried to get us off the microphones.